You're listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 412.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? Hope you are all doing well. Here we are at the end of July. Amazing that we are here. We've had such a terrific month. Enjoyed time with our family, friends, summer outdoor activities, and enjoying my gardens and tomatoes and so many summer things that have been really great here in Kentucky this time of year. Also enjoying some time in Michigan on a vacation with our family. That was a lot of fun. And getting ready to dive into August here in my cookbook bunker. If you are a dietitian or chef or culinary pro who wants to publish a cookbook with a traditional publishing house, I want you to listen to this special announcement just for you. If you're ready to stop performing for social media algorithms and you would love to build a cookbook audience that a publisher would love, I am hosting a very special 3-part masterclass called Grow Your Audience. If you're ready to swap social media views for a subscribed community, turn your kitchen life into personalized messages so that you can connect with readers and test winning book ideas at the same time, or escape the exhausting social media grind so you can reclaim your dignity and build an asset that publishers love, this class is for you. I'm so excited to offer it and would love to have you register and join us. The link is down below in the show notes, or you can head on over to www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/grow, and I cannot wait to see you there. Today on the show, I have an interview with Dora Ramirez. Dora was born in Mexico and came to the U.S. to attend culinary school at the Culinary Institute of America. She transitioned from restaurant work to online content creation after having her 3 children, and now works as a recipe developer, food photographer, and content creator. She is the author of Comida Casera, more than 100 vegan recipes from traditional to modern Mexican dishes. Dora is a James Beard Award winner in the vegetable-focused cookbook category, and this conversation today focuses on Dora's personal background, her decision to go vegan, and her decision to write this cookbook, not just to veganize traditional Mexican dishes, but to surface the already plant-based foundation that exists within indigenous Mexican gastronomy. This is called La Milpa, which is an indigenous agricultural practice that she takes us on a tour through. Then we talk all about the book, which is organized as a tour through Mexican culinary landmarks, covering everything from street food to moles, tamales, modern restaurant recipes for Mexican food, as well as chapters on desserts, beverages, and ice cream. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with James Beard Award winner, Dora Ramirez. Hi, Dora. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, excited to have you here as well. Can't wait to talk all about your beautiful new book and your James Beard Award. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hey, everyone. My name is Dora Ramirez, and I am a chef and a cookbook author. I was born in Ciudad Acuña, Coahuila, Mexico, and I came to the U.S. to go to culinary school. I went to the CIA, and when I started having babies, I transitioned to working online. And so I've been working online as a chef, content creator, recipe developer, food photographer for the last 11 years.
Wonderful. How do you like the life of being able to stay at home and create the content and care for the children?
It's a dream. It's a
Yeah.
dream come true. I wouldn't be able to do this if I was working in a restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah. When you have to go to a physical location or it's just a completely different picture. So tell us a little bit about your family.
So I have 3 kids. My oldest is 16, so I'm going into the teenager phase. Yeah. It's a wild ride.
It is a wild ride.
Yeah. I live in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm a single mom, and my kids are special needs kids, so we have a very busy, busy life.
Yeah. Yeah. And all the more reason to be able to be, I guess, grateful for the type of work that you do, that you're able to um, base it in your home, in your kitchen, around the kids when they need you. And
Yes.
it's nice to be there. I often tell people who have culinary, nutrition, food certifications, degrees, programs, how much content people need and how much help people need when it comes to cooking and learning about food. And it is truly an amazing thing to be able to share that with your family when they're young and to be there for them and to have it kind of seamlessly flow through. If you're cooking food, we can maybe eat what we're cooking, or they can try things, they can test things. And I can't help but think that they were involved in the tasting and testing of the recipes that you prepared for this book. So I can't wait to hear about that as we dive into talking about the book. So your book just recently won a James Beard Award. And I've had a string of James Beard Award winners on the show. Very excited to have you here. Your book won in the vegetable focused category. I'd love to hear about the process for you from the time that you were nominated until the time you won the award.
It was all really quick. Like of course I knew about the James Beard Awards.
Right.
And it was a goal of mine when I was writing the book. But the submission was the publisher submitted the book, and I just made sure that it was submitted, and it was just so quick. It seemed to me, like you're nominated and like a month later it's the award ceremony. So I don't think I even had time to process it. I'm like, oh, it's amazing, I'm nominated. And then a month later I'm in Chicago.
Yeah.
But the whole experience was just so wonderful. It was so validating. So much work was put into this book, so much of my life, of my kids, of my personal experience.
Yeah.
And then to be able to be recognized by my peers in that setting and to meet people that I've admired and to share that moment with all those people was very special.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And so, again, congratulations on that. It's a very exciting award to win. I often tell my listeners that when you look at any particular year for the book category, if you're trying to build a library of books, it's often good to check and see what the James Beard Award winners were for that year. It's not that it invalidates any other book that was ever written, but it does kind of point you to some that maybe stand out in the crowd. And I think it's fun to think about that. Even years past, award winners, people who have been around in the food world for a while, and then also introducing us to new voices and new ways of eating. So talk a little bit about your book from a high level and what the concept was going into actually proposing and writing the book.
So my kind of specialty or my area of interest is vegan Mexican food. And so I became vegan about 11, 12 years ago. And when I became vegan, it's kind of like a shift of perspective because you immediately think that you will never be able to have your cultural foods again. And that's like your first thought. So then my mother was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and I was trying to get her to go vegan. And she was the one that told me, she's like, why are you trying to feed me tofu when you could just give me rice and beans? And I'm like, oh, yeah, yes, of course. And so that's what kind of started the whole journey into exploring not only veganizing traditional Mexican dishes and my family recipes, but also researching already, the big plant-based culture that exists within Mexican cooking and within, indigenous cooking in Mexican gastronomy.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because that might be something when people start to think about Mexican food that they're not fully aware of. Tell us a little bit about the indigenous cooking, the things that were present in that way of eating, and a little bit about how that connects to your book specifically. Yeah.
So the basis of Mexican cuisine is something called la milpa. And so la milpa is an agricultural practice that is the intercropping of corn, beans, squash, and then it's a self-sustaining ecosystem. So everything is used. The fungus that grows on the corn is called huitlacoche. The weeds that grow, from the ground are called quelites. They're wild greens and they're also eaten. So it's a self-sustaining system. That's how the indigenous people of Mexico grew their food. And they were hunters and foragers as well. So they did eat animal products. They did whatever they hunted. They ate insects. They ate fish. But the base of the cuisine is corn, beans, and squash. And so most of their diet was vegetable diet, with supplemented by the animal or insect or, that they hunt or gathered. And so there's a lot of indigenous recipes that are naturally plant-based. So with the arrival of the Spanish and the conquest, they brought pigs, they brought domesticated cows, they brought wheat and spices. And so all of that kind of combined into what, we have like a modern interpretation of Mexican cooking. But the base of the cuisine still remains heavily plant-based. And a lot of people don't know that. So I wanted to kind of bring that forward. And that's one of the first chapters in the book, because I believe that's like the basis of it. And then from there, I kind of explore and play around with more modern interpretations of traditional Mexican dishes, using like a meat substitute like soy curls to substitute beef. And so kind of play around a little bit with both concepts.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think that I have to think that a lot of indigenous cultures, it was plant-based with the hunting just and maybe fishing on top of it on the side. And that you really do see those foods in a lot of the foods that people think of when they think of, Mexican food. But it's really beautiful how you're able to intertwine it. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about a pantry stocking, perhaps? First of all, if people are interested in using your book or cooking from it, the kinds of things that they might need to have on hand.
So I try to be as varied as possible and also as true to the cuisine as possible. So if you see the pantry section in my book, it's huge. Yeah. It's like 5 pages long, because I wanted to share with you the, I guess, traditional recipe and didn't want to substitute ingredients that I know maybe are hard to find in the United States. Like there's a beautiful herb called hoja santa. It has a flavor kind of like between anise and basil, and it's used in mostly southern Mexico, southern central Mexico. And it's very hard to find. Like I live in Texas. It's very hard to find in Texas. You have to grow it. But I wanted to include it in, kind of stay true to the recipe. And then I include in the pantry section the substitutions. If you can't find this, you can use this. And so if you want to kind of explore indigenous Mexican cooking, the first thing you need is beans, corn, squash, all of that is very widely available. Mm-hmm. But corn, I would say, is super, super important. A lot of our dishes are made either with actual corn, like fresh corn, or they're made with corn flour. So for sure, corn flour, which is called masarina, is mm-hmm. referred to in the US. Yep. Masarina, dry chiles. There's a section in the pantry where there's pictures of the different dry chiles. There's also a table that will show you what the fresh form of the chile is, and when they dry it, what it's called. So it's a different name.
Yeah.
And so dry chiles is something that, people kind of get intimidated by them, but they're very, very easy to use. They're so easy to use. So I would encourage you to do dry chiles, fresh chiles, masarina for sure. And then maybe, people are very familiar with cilantro, but there's also an herb called epazote that is more widely available than hoja santa. And then there's also kind of like more specialty or niche products like huitlacoche, which is what I was talking earlier, like the corn fungus. Or there's like zucchini blossoms, which are not hard to find when they're in season, and also used very commonly in central and southern Mexico.
Yeah. And in San Antonio and other places around the US, I would suspect that there is larger availability of ingredients and things that people can buy. You did offer substitutions. I'd like to talk a little bit about dried chilies. I know that those play a large role in the creation of a lot of sauces. Would you have any tips for people if they're buying the chilies or wanting to use them to make a sauce with?
Yes. Sometimes I would start by going to your local Mexican market or grocery store because they usually have fresher chiles in like the um, big stores. So if you choose your dried chile, you want to try and choose some that look whole, that are not very brittle or easily break. If they're kind of on the fresher side, they're going to be a little more flexible. And you can still work with the older ones, but I do feel that they lose some of their flavor.
Yeah.
And then it's also really hard to kind of take the seeds out if you're working with like something that's super crispy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say look for chiles that look whole, look for some that are a little bit flexible and not really hard, that have good coloring. There are some that over time they kind of get discolored and you'll see that discoloration. So
Mhm.
an even color all throughout. And yeah, so try your Mexican market first. And usually they either stock up like packaged versions of dried chiles or they sell them. I forgot the word.
And I think they
I'm
sell them
thinking about
individually or in bulk sometimes.
yeah,
They
bulk. That's the
right,
word.
right. They might have them in a
Yeah.
bin, and you could pick out a couple of
Yes.
different kinds.
Hmm.
I think that it's nice for people to see the table and to know that it could be the very same chili. Dried, it's called one thing. Fresh, it's called another. So pay attention to that. It's a nice photo that you have there to help people do that. And then along with these chilies and herbs, there's other ingredients in your basics chapter that you talk about people having on hand or making in order to prepare the recipes that are in the book. Everything from like there's cashew cheeses, there's sauces, there's salsas, tortillas. So tell us a little bit about the basics chapter.
So the basics chapter is what I would say, the
Yeah, the
basics:
basics. Yeah,
rice,
yeah,
beans,
yeah.
salsas. Not only salsas, but also there's one recipe for chiles toreados, which is a kind of way of like pan roasting serrano peppers, a little bit of lime, and soy sauce is very common here in northern Mexico to eat that with your tacos. So it's all very classic complements to Mexican cuisine. There's a big section on vegan dairy. I am not a big fan of processed vegan cheese, so I usually
Mm.
make my own. So there's recipes to make your own like melty vegan cheese, your own crema, your own like soft fresh cheese, and they're all very simple recipes that really complement the food and really help you not miss, that like dairy aspect of it.
Yeah, yeah. And if that's something you're able to do and accomplish with 3 children, I'm sure that it's something that we can all do in our kitchen if we want
Yeah.
to make it. And it does make a difference, I think, to make those things fresh and not buy them prepared or processed. I don't know this for sure, but it might be a little more cost effective too to make them on your own than buy them.
It depends because a lot of them are nut based.
Yeah.
So if you can find like a good price on nuts.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that's probably the thing that people would want to keep their eyes open for. Almonds are used, cashews mainly. Any other two other nuts other than those?
Now, usually the vegan cheese, I either use cashews or almonds.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So that's great. Nice descriptions on how to do all of that. All right. In the first chapter, you mentioned the indigenous kitchen, and what can people expect to find in this chapter that sets it apart from the rest of the book?
So this is my favorite chapter. It was an experience. It was a collaboration between a group of indigenous cooks. They're called cocineras tradicionales from Mexico City, Oaxaca, Yucatan. And we collaborated together to write this chapter. And what I really did was travel to them and document their recipes. And so I went, and the really fun part is that I took the children with me.
Hmm.
So it became like a huge family experience. And I was kind of nervous about it, if we were going to be able to coordinate with the children. But the indigenous people are so welcoming of
Right.
children. They're like, no, bring them, we'll have them work. And so they did. They ended up like making tortillas and like peeling things and like grinding pumpkin seeds. But the whole experience was so amazing because the indigenous people really, really took me into their homes and let me document what they were doing. And so that chapter itself, I did not change any part of the recipe. I documented the recipe as it was made. I took my little scale, I took my notebook, I took a video camera, my phone, and as they were making the recipes, I would stop and be like, can we weigh that? And so we were like, weigh whatever, like in Spanish, you say un puñito, like they'd be like, do you just need like a little bit of this? And I'm like, let's weigh it.
Yeah.
And so everything has been weighed and documented. And then in the bottom of the recipe, I put my notes where I recreate this recipe at home with the ingredients available to me. And then I give you tips on how you can do that in your own home. But the original recipe is a recipe that was documented. And the goal was to share some of these recipes are family recipes, or they're called recetas de rescate. They're recipes that these indigenous women are trying to promote and rescue. And so this is such a special chapter to be able to bring those recipes to life in English and to document them just as they are without adapting, without changing them, and just kind of sharing their history and their culture, which is also my culture, with you.
Yes. So would you be willing to share a story of one of the cooks and something that you prepared together?
Yes, and it was actually one of the first recipes we made. It's called chichilo, and it's a mole that's very specific to Tlacolula de Matamoros in Oaxaca. And so this mole, the woman who wrote the recipe or who did the recipe, her name is Angelina, and she is a Zapotec indigenous person. And she told us a wonderful story on how this mole is a funeral mole. So it's usually called a sad mole or like a bitter mole because they believe that when you're making it, the mole keeps the feeling of the person making it. So whenever they make it for funerals. They're always sad. So it's always like a sad, little bit of a bitter mole. And it's a community cooking. So somebody dies and then the person, the closest person to the person who died will gather everybody and give them assignments. You bring this ingredient, you bring this ingredient, you bring this ingredient. And then they all gather together in the home of the person who died and make the mole together. And so the loved one who survived is the one kind of directing, but they make the mole in community and then they eat it. And so it's a very ceremonial, spiritual kind of mole. And so it was so amazing to have it recreated before me and then have Evangelina kind of share her story with it and say that she dedicates her time to promote this mole because it's a recipe that is now being lost. The younger generation is not really interested in doing the whole ceremony of gathering and making the mole. And so it's kind of getting lost within the community. And so she's dedicated her time to promoting this recipe, to sharing it. And when she told us a story and when she tried it, like there were literal tears in her eyes. She's like, I just can't help it. Every time I eat this mole, like all I feel is sadness.
Yeah.
So it was like a very special, special recipe.
Yeah, it's great to have access to that here in the book. And it looks like it says she went on to win in 2022 the cooking competition, the fourth encounter of the Oaxacan. Is it a traditional Oaxacan, I guess, some sort of a competition, and that she serves it just with rice. And
yes.
Then also you formed a patty out of, tell me a little bit about what you serve it with.
She served it with a patty made out of quelites. And so quelites is just like a blanket term for wild greens. And in the US, we would consider these weeds. In Mexico, there's a very big variety of wild greens. And so she boiled them in salted water with garlic and onion. And then she kind of squeezed the water out and like formed it into a patty. And then that's what she served the mole over, and then rice.
Nice. Beautiful. And a beautiful picture of her and of the dish, and a wonderful explanation of it. So I can see why it's so important to have a recipe like that here in the book. But I want to talk about another indigenous recipe. There's other women and cooks that have provided these for you. Let's do one more. Which one do you think we'd like to talk about next?
The other one, which is one of my favorites, it's from a Mayan priest, and his name is Bruno Cocom. And the recipe is almost like a pumpkin seed meatball. And so this one just blew my mind. And it's a recipe that's also very regional, because we did travel a little bit in Yucatan. And no, like I asked people about it, and they're like, no, we've never had it. We've never had it. So it seems like it's a very, very specific regional recipe. And it's really amazing because the pumpkin seeds are toasted and then ground like in a mill. And then a dough is made with that kind of pumpkin seed flour, and spices are added to it. And then it's kneaded. So when you knead that kind of dough, it starts releasing oils. And so he saves the oil that's released. And as it releases oil, the flour that's left kind of congeals. Like that same oil helps it kind of stick together.
Mm-hmm.
And so he forms it into little patties and then drops it into a broth of water and chaya. Now, chaya is called in English tree spinach. It's kind of like a shrub. It's very similar to spinach, and it's got kind of a mild flavor. It's a very typical plant eaten in Yucatan. And so the broth itself, it was just like water, garlic, and the chaya leaves. And then he drops the patties in there, and they form meatballs. Like you taste them, and they're so meaty and like so hearty. And it's like a little broth with like a pumpkin seed meatball.
Yeah.
Like even the kids, like when I asked, out of all the recipes we made, which one was your favorite? And that one was their favorite as well.
Interesting. And there's a story in the head note that if someone stops by while someone is making the dish and interrupts making the dish, the patties or the meatballs will fall apart in the broth, and all your work will be for nothing.
Yes.
So I guess you have to go, if you're going to watch them make this, at the beginning of the process. You can't just like come in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he did say we were making it, and he was like, well, you better pray nobody stops by, or this is not going to work out.
Isn't that fascinating? I think that's kind of the neat thing about those two, is it's really not just about the recipe itself and the food. It's the story that goes along with it.
Yeah, for sure. And for that specific chapter, I mean, it was so incredible to meet all the different cocineras and all the different cooks, and to listen to their story and to bring that story to life with the food.
Yeah. You know, some of my favorite cookbooks, there's a woman that did that with grandmas from Italy, just making all these different pasta shapes. A recent cookbook that I had on the show all about these little bakeries in Italy, like making still family, Italian cookies, just tons of different varieties. But it's not, again, about the cookie itself. It's about that people are still doing this, and they're making an effort to continue these traditions and to make sure that they're documented and passing them on. What kind of hope do you have for younger generations to pick up on these recipes?
It's hard because I have young children.
Yeah.
and they're not interested in food yet. And I've met a lot of young people that are just not interested in food. I think that by incorporating a story into it, it really brings it to life. Yeah. And I can see that because I recorded videos and then I upload these videos to social media.
Yeah.
And so that changes the way that people see these recipes. They're not only, because some especially older recipes, they might be unappealing. They're not as viral. They're not as colorful. They're not, like rainbow colored. So bringing that story aspect into it, I think could really help bridge that connection between tradition and the younger generation.
Right. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that does drive a lot of people's interest in things, is the appearance or the video or the photos. And really, when you think about the importance of it, it's so much deeper than that. And it's usually rooted to people in the land, and communicating that connection with a modern culture is a little bit more difficult to do. So I hope that through talking about it here, we've been able to spark some interest in it, get some people interested in talking about the importance of it and sharing it with people that need to know. So that's so neat that you were able to do that. I bet traveling to meet these people was a joy, and what a great thing that you got to take your kids with you as well.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So once you go through the indigenous section, the book kind of takes a little bit of a different journey then. It's almost like we're going through different types of eateries in Mexico. So I'd love if you would tell us a little bit about how the rest of the book is laid out, and maybe we can talk about a few of the chapters.
So my goal was to have it be kind of like a culinary journey. So that's why we start at the indigenous kitchen, and then you go to like culinary landmarks in Mexico. And so you would say the market, huge landmark in Mexico, street food. And then we have home cooking, which is the name of the book, home cooking. A lot of the recipes that are near and dear to our hearts are all mom's or grandma's home cooking. So that was a very important chapter. There's also the market chapter is called Mole from the Market. And so that one explores all the different types of moles that you can find at the market or that you can find in different regions of Mexico. We also stopped by La Tamaleria. So they're all actual places. So that's why it's just kind of like a journey through different types of eateries or landmarks within Mexico. There's La Panaderia, which is a shop that sells baked goods. There's La Paleteria, which sells popsicles and ice cream. And so my goal is to take you kind of like a trip through Mexico. If you travel to Mexico, these are the places that I would want you to stop and try.
Nice. Well, let's start with the home. I think that's the place that you named the book after, home cooking in Mexico. And I'd love to hear how it's different then from what you can get if we go out into the town or into the markets or into the bakeries, and what makes home cooking different in Mexico.
So home cooking, I would say the same as in the US. It's, I think, simpler versions. And it's also a lot of comfort food, but comfort food in Mexico is different from comfort food in the US. When you think comfort food, well, when I think comfort food in the US, you might think of like casseroles, like cheesy things, or like kind of, and what comes to mind is like hearty, very kind of like luscious eating.
Right.
But you're making it at home. But in Mexico, I think it's just more, you have to have rice and beans for sure. Rice and beans and tortillas, all the meals. And then from there, usually there's a guisado, which is some type of stew. And then a sopita, which could be like a sopita de fideo, which is kind of like a Mexican noodle soup. And there's like different, like pozole is like another soup. So I kind of touch a little bit of all of it. And it's a bit of home cooking that I ate growing up, or dishes from my family restaurant, which was my home cooking because I grew up eating at the restaurant. But it's a lot of dishes that I think this chapter specifically was made for Mexicans and Mexican Americans, where you would say, I just really miss my mom's cooking. And then this is it. There's like meatballs and chipotle sauce. There's enchiladas, salsa verde, all these dishes that are not complicated, but that they're very, very good. And they're so close to our hearts.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's the thing that I can see, even just being from the U.S., is when I look then at the other chapters, like making mole, making tamales, those are a little bit more complicated dishes, maybe more multi-step preparations, and might not be something that you would make at home on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if people in Mexico, rather than making them at home, they would just go out to get them, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I went to a market in Los Angeles, and I remember the mole stand, like in the market, all the different varieties of mole that people could get. I mean, I'm sure you can visualize what I'm talking about, but I mean,
yes.
There just wasn't one or two flavors. There was like a lot.
Yes.
Different colors, I'm sure different bases, different textures, different ingredients. And that would be something that people would maybe perhaps buy, then make it home. Unless you are following the indigenous tradition, there are certain times you maybe would make a mole with other people at home.
Yeah, the mole chapter is not for the weak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because usually people, you go to the market to buy mole and you'll buy the mole paste.
Yeah.
And so the mole paste is really basically the mole itself. And you just
Right.
have to add a liquid to it. If your preference, you might add a little bit more peanuts, you might add a little bit more sweetener, you might add a little bit more chocolate. But the whole work is already done. You're just buying the paste. And so the mole chapter, I wanted to teach you how to make a mole from scratch. And so you can see, I would say the most complicated one is mole negro. And so you can see, you look at that, the publisher is like, do we have to put how much time this takes? Because I think it says 6 hours.
Yeah. You said, yes, we have to put you want it to be true to the recipe and true to the, yes.
Yes. So yeah, it takes 6 hours. And so what I did try to do was, in most of the moles, the complicated ones, in the notes, I tell you how to do it in several days. So you don't have to spend like 6 solid hours doing it. I say you can toast the chiles like the day before. You can do that. So kind of break it down so that it's more manageable.
Yeah, I mean, people make sourdough all the time, and it's the starter, and you got to feed it, and then you got to make the bread, you got to let it rise. So to me, if there are people that invest time in making homemade sourdough bread and the starter, there isn't any reason that people wouldn't want to invest time in making mole. I think that it looks like there's about 10, maybe 11 different types in this book, which is amazing. A really good study in it. So if someone really wants to spend some time taking a journey through the different kinds, I mean, this is a beautiful example of how they might be able to do that.
Yes, and they're not all complicated.
Yeah.
There are some moles that are more home-cooked moles where, they'll be done in 40, 45 minutes. There's not a 6-hour process.
Right. Did you have to veganize these, or are they traditionally vegan?
Well, traditionally they use chicken broth. So all I really had to do is kind of change the chicken broth. And then instead of lard, I use oil. Okay. So it wasn't like, I wouldn't say I veganized them because
you could use those ingredients.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's neat. Yeah. So that's a wonderful section. Let's talk a little bit about street food and the role it plays in Mexican cuisine.
So a lot of the best Mexican food is street food. A lot of the tacos, and it comes to mind like nights out partying. The first thing you want to do when you're done, you leave, the bar or the club, you want to go get tacos. Yeah. And, those are some of the best meals I've had, eating tacos on the street. Or now that I'm vegan, Mexico City is the king of quesadillas. And quesadillas in Mexico City, cheese is optional. Like they'll ask you want a quesadilla with cheese or without cheese? And so to be able to kind of experience kind of like that same feeling of, I'm going to go have tacos on the street and then go to Mexico City. And, when I worked with a woman in Mexico City who makes quesadillas and tlacoyos are like kind of football shaped masa little boats, and they're filled with ground up fava beans, or they're filled with mushrooms. And so she grinds the corn, like she nixtamalizes the corn herself. Wow. And then brings it. She doesn't even live in Mexico City. She lives like an hour away, like drives into Mexico City with her little stand. And she's, nixtamalizing her own corn. She does all the sides. Like she grows her own, like forages her mushrooms, all this stuff. And I'm eating on the street and I'm like, this could be a Michelin star restaurant. Yes. Like the sourcing of the ingredients, the techniques, except it's a little stand outside of a market. Wow. And so you can find all different levels of cuisine, I would say, in street food. It's not necessarily cheap or easy food. It's just most of the time just really good food. Yeah. Fascinating. I think that's a neat way to think about it. And not, again, things that you would necessarily make at home on a regular basis. Right. So what else? We've got tamales, and then there's also a section on modern Mexico. Yeah. So modern Mexico is one of the landmarks because Mexican cooking has evolved so much, especially in the last 20 years. 30, 40 years ago, Mexican cooking was kind of getting in its own legs. Before it was a lot of European influences. And then all of a sudden, we're using Mexican ingredients. We're trying to promote Mexican cooking. And so the Modern Mexico chapter was kind of like a little peek into modern Mexican restaurants, but also what I would serve if I had my own restaurant. So that was a fun chapter to do, kind of picture, like if I had my own restaurant and it's a kind of modern Mexican restaurant, what would I serve? And that's what that chapter, I think it's a fun chapter because there's things like there's a tartare that's made out of watermelon, and it's got like Asian and Mexican flavors. There's a nixtamalized like butternut squash. So applying that same technique of like soaking in lime to a squash, and it produces like a very creamy interior. And so I kind of played around a little bit in that chapter, and I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. A lot of really looks more upscale even in the photography for that section. You can definitely tell that it takes a little bit of a leap, but it's a really great way to, again, take this journey with you through different types of establishments that serve Mexican cuisine. All right. Let's talk a little bit about, I think the beverages are really interesting also. I'd love to talk about those. And then you've got to tell me about the desserts or the ice cream and popsicles.
Yeah, so the beverages are aguas frescas. And aguas frescas, I mean, and I think most people are familiar with aguas frescas, but it's usually fruit and water and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just kind of like fresh water is the direct translation. But depending on the region in Mexico that you're in, the fruit changes. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful way of using fruit that maybe is a little too ripe. And so you can just blend it with water, add some sugar, and then that's what you're having with your meals instead of a soda, instead of a lemonade, like something really high in sugar.
Yeah.
And so some of my favorites are in there. There's a beet and orange. There's a cucumber lime. There's a tamarindo, agua de tamarindo, which is tamarind, which is the same concept. You know, you kind of boil the tamarind and puree it with water and sweetener. And then there's atoles. And so atoles is a very traditional, very indigenous drink, which is just ground up corn. Like in the indigenous way would be like the nixtamalized corn. Masa is diluted with water and flavoring is added to it. The modern interpretation is using masarina. And so it's very typically had in the winter because it's a hot, like thick drink. And you can do strawberry. You can do, if it's chocolate, it's called champurrado. It's like hot Mexican hot chocolate thickened with masarina. There's also a guayaba atole, which is also a winter seasonal fruit here in northern Mexico. It's kind of winterish.
Yeah.
But you can do any fruit. And it's such a very filling drink. And it's usually had with tamales. So that's a very like Christmas thing. You're having tamales, you're having atole.
Yep. Lovely. Those are very refreshing looking drinks. There's also some hot chocolates, corn thickened. And like you said, the drinks that actually are served during warm weather also. All right, let's talk a little bit about the sweets. I know there's cakes, things you might get at a bakery, but there's also ice creams and ice pops.
Yes, the cakes are the very typical, you know, what I would say classic Mexican desserts. There's leches, there's we call it pastel imposible or choco flan, which is the bottom is chocolate and the top is a flan. There's flan. So a lot of it is I would say that's a very veganized chapter. So I took classic staples and then did do some substitutions so that I could do vegan versions of them. They are lower in sugar than the typical dessert would be. And so also lower in fat because there's no butter. There's
Correct.
there is fat.
Right, but no whipped cream or heavy cream.
Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite is a cake called mostachon. It's a very northern Mexico cake. And the bottom is like a cookie base made with pecans and Ritz crackers. If you're doing it non-plant based, it's a meringue. So you whip egg whites and you kind of put that together. And so instead of that, I used aquafaba, which is the liquid in the can of chickpeas. Mm-hmm. And so you can whip that like egg white, and that's what I use to bind it. And so that you bake it, and that's the bottom of the cakes. I guess it's more like a tart. And then you top it with like macerated strawberries, and I made like a cashew cream cheese to go with it.
Yeah. Looks really great. Look, kind of a version. It's almost like the layer on the bottom is very thin. And I had a discussion about aquafaba with someone as guest on another show. If chickpea liquid is the only bean liquid that you can use to make the cream or the whipped topping, do other beans work, or are they too discolored? Or
No, they do. They do
yeah.
work. What you do have to sometimes reduce it.
Mm,
So because I know I've tried it with not canned version, like you
correct.
can do it also with the liquid from the chickpeas, but sometimes with that one you have to reduce it. So
I
simmer
see.
it until it thickens a little bit,
Yeah.
and then you can whip it. But I've done it with white beans.
Mm-hmm.
So also the liquid from white beans and chickpeas are the most common.
And I guess, like, I think about if it was black beans or kidney beans, sometimes that liquid is colored from the beans.
Yeah,
So
it's
you would
colored.
have a cream that would not be white. It would be
Yeah.
red, or it would be black, I guess, which would be kind of a creative way to do it. But
Yeah.
I was just curious if it worked from any bean. So you did answer my question. But if you want the color to be pure, you probably need to focus on the beans that have a lighter color when they're in the can. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. And tell us a little bit about ice pops.
Yes, Mexico has a very big ice cream and popsicle culture. There's all kinds of flavors. I think the craziest flavor, think about it, is probably cheese. There's like a
Wow.
cheese popsicle or like a cheese ice cream. But there's corn, there's avocado, there's all the fruits that you can think of. There's an arroz con leche popsicle, which is like a rice pudding popsicle. So it's a lot, it's kind of the same concept as the aguas frescas. It's
Mhm.
all using seasonal regional fruit and then making a popsicle out of it or making an ice cream out of it. So there is a corn ice cream in the book, which is one of my favorites. If you've never tried corn ice cream, please make this recipe. Because not only, I mean, corn is sweet already, but in the US, we eat a lot of sweet corn flakes,
Yep.
Like Captain Crunch is made with corn, like there's a lot of corn sweetness. So it's not going to be unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And if you're using fresh corn, it's going to be so good. And then I use to make kind of like the base, I simmer I cut the corn off the cob, but then I simmer the cob in there. So then that releases the starches in there. So it makes a very creamy ice cream without having to add, like heavy cream or egg.
Yeah, interesting. And it's perfect time of year to do that in the summer. Corn is going to be, at least where we live now. Talking about seasonality is kind of tricky when people list it around the world, but we're currently headed into late July, and it will be it's corn time, especially here. I live in northern Kentucky, but in Kentucky, parts of the South, a lot of corn, and people can, of course, you probably can buy it at the supermarket. But if it's fresh corn, more seasonally grown from a place where it's coming off the vine, now it's a delicious time of year to have corn. So I might have to give those a try.
Yeah.
Yeah. So usually as we're wrapping up the show, talk to people about cookbooks, if there's favorite cookbooks, but you have something unique going on that none of my other authors have really talked about doing. So tell us a little bit about your online cookbook club.
So I just started it. This is our first month, but I'm a huge cookbook lover. Like even before I went vegan, I've always had a big cookbook collection. And so when I decided that my thing was going to be Mexican food, I started collecting Mexican cookbooks. So I do have a large collection of Mexican cookbooks. And then I also have access here in I'm not in San Antonio right now, but in San Antonio to the UTSA Special Collections Library, which holds the largest Mexican cookbook collection in all of the US. And so I'm able.
University of Texas at San Antonio, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. And if you ever visit San Antonio, I recommend you make an appointment because anybody can make an appointment. And all you have to do is tell them what books you want to see and they'll bring the books out for you. And I think the oldest book, I'm going to mess it up, but it's from the 1800s that they have. Yeah. And they also have, like modern Mexican cookbooks. So I have my own collection, and then I have access to the collection at the UTSA Special Collections Library. And I love that. I mean, that's my passion project. I love looking at them. I love recreating the recipes. I do a lot of vegetarian recipes, but then I also try to veganize recipes that are not vegetarian. And I've learned so much from the different cookbook authors about the ingredients available at that time. And so I wanted to share that with my audience. And so what we're doing is every week I choose a different cookbook. I share if I have the cookbook in a digital version, I'll share the digital version of the whole cookbook. And if I don't, usually I'll take a picture of the cover and the recipe. And so I'll share that. Usually all the recipes are in Spanish, because we're working with cookbooks from the 1940s, from the 1960s, from the 1970s. Yep. And so they're all in Spanish. And so I share the original photo of the book, the cookbook, the recipe, and then I translate it for you. I'll do a direct translation. And then I'll do what I call the modern interpretation. And so the modern interpretation is really modern recipe writing, because the recipe writing done in 1940 basically is saying, the roasted tomato needs to go with this and then blend in this. And so people are very used to modern recipe writing, which is very descriptive. And so what I do is I take that original translated recipe and do a more descriptive version of it, kind of step by step. So we like put the pumpkin seeds in the pan, toast them at this temperature, because what I really want is for the people in the club to be able to make it at home.
Yes.
And not to be kind of wondering, like, I wonder what she means by this, or I wonder what the author meant. And so I'm kind of doing my own interpretation of that and putting it in a modern recipe format so that you can make it at home.
Nice.
And then I'll share a video of me making that recipe so that you can also make it at home and, not wonder, I wonder if I did this right or if I didn't do it right. And then we share the pictures. Like if you made the recipe, you can go on to the community and share the picture of your recipe and kind of talk about it and what you thought about it, if you didn't like it, if you liked it. And so it's just starting out, but I'm super excited about it. It's kind of bringing a new kind of like a refreshing idea and like project into my life.
Yeah, because when you finish writing a cookbook, and I mean, you're promoting it, but things kind of like change, and talk a little bit about what life was like with your kids writing the book, and then just what life was like being a cookbook writer.
Yeah, so when I started the process, I spoke to a lot of authors beforehand, and they're like, it's really hard, it's going to need a lot of coordination, and I naively thought, well, I'm already recipe developing, like I'm already doing this, like really, how hard is this going to be? Yeah, I was wrong. It was very difficult, but not the actual writing, the photography, like none of that was hard. That was fun. It was coordinating my entire life to fit into this new schedule and this new deadline. And then at the same time, having to continue to do all the things that I did with the kids, taking to school, feeding them, everything that entails raising children. And so I think the first year, because it was almost a 3-year process. Mm-hmm. Writing the book was very fun for me. It's stressful because of the coordination of schedules. But halfway through, I got a divorce. And so that thankfully, I had already written the manuscript. So the manuscript was written, and now it's kind of like in editing phases. So it wasn't as time consuming, which left me time to cry. No,
yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's a lot. And I think that if you're at that phase though, where you're reviewing edits that have been made, it's a different types of attention you have to pay to it than actually writing it. So
yeah.
So
it was challenging in a personal aspect because of the divorce and, going from, raising kids with another person to then raising kids by myself.
Yes.
But the process itself of writing the cookbook, I found very rewarding.
Yeah. and all your hard work now in print and bound. And I think the online cookbook club then allows you to explore these recipes in a deeper way, different people's recipes, veganizing them, looking at different traditions and the way even recipes were written, like you said, 50 years ago versus how they're written now. How's the club going, and what's the response been so far?
Yeah, it's been going really well. I'm looking for more people so that we can have I think, greater participation.
Yeah.
People have been sharing their pictures, but I would say a small percentage of them. So my vision is that we have a large amount of people so that every week we can share each other's, pictures and show each other what we made. And then, I think as we grow, we'll be able to explore maybe different areas that other people are interested in. Right now, I'm just choosing whatever, I like. But I think the more people we have and the more input there is, that's going to change kind of like the vision of it. If people are more interested, let's say, for example, in veganizing meat recipes, then we might do like a month where we're only veganizing recipes that traditionally have meat.
I see.
Or if people are more interested in indigenous recipes, then we might focus on indigenous cookbooks. So right now it's just kind of like me choosing whatever I want. But I think the more people we have, then that would enrich it and we can explore all the different areas.
Yeah, that's great. So this is a perfect time to ask you then, if people do want to connect with you online or learn about your online cookbook club, how might they do that?
So I'm on all social media as @Dora's Table. And I also have a website, dorastable.com. And so if you go to any of my social media or my website, you'll be able to find information about the Cookbook Club. And also I have on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. And for the newsletter, I'll just send out maybe like seasonal recipes. Like it was 4th of July and I sent out an email like 4th of July recipes. But then I also, that's the place where I share news. So like if I'm having an event or like the Cookbook Club, or I also give online cooking classes. So I'm having an online cooking class, then that's where all the really information goes to.
Wonderful. So people can head on over to your website, dorastable.com, to get more information. So it's been wonderful to have you on the show. So, wow, we talked about a lot of this journey through the culinary landmarks, your visits with the indigenous cooks, and your veganizing of recipes we filled a full hour here with talking just about that. It's been terrific to hear about it. I wish you nothing but the best. Your beautiful book, Comida Casera, more than 100 vegan recipes from traditional to modern Mexican dishes.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you again. And welcome. Congratulations again on your James Beard Award. It's well-deserved. And hope you have a great rest of your month and enjoy the promotion of your book.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.